During the World Cup finals, I brought soup to my husband at his office as he was working overtime. When I arrived outside the screening room of his office, I heard his new assistant, Jodie Lenford, asking with a laugh, "Mr. Hayes, don't you always tell us that Mrs. Hayes watches every World Cup match with you? Why did you leave her alone at home tonight?" My husband, Tristan, was silent for a while before replying. "Every time she watches the match with me, she'll just lecture me about drinking less and going to bed early. It takes the joy out of everything." Jodie laughed again. "Let me accompany you tonight instead. I'll replace Mrs. Hayes for this duty. You're just like her back when she was young and fiery." Tristan once told me that I would be the only one by his side during every finals match, but I watched as he gently placed the sports jersey I had carefully picked for him years ago over the shoulders of another woman. Jodie asked, "Won't Mrs. Hayes be mad if she finds out about this?" Tristan laughed. "She's learned her lesson. She won't make a huge fuss like she did before." That was when loud cheering erupted from the screen. I stood in the dark as I suddenly realized that some matches would end with me being benched before the starting whistle was even blown. I heard another round of applause from the screening room as I placed the thermal bag next to my feet while slowly opening the door. Jodie Lenford's voice could be heard coming through the creak of the door. "Look at how detailed the sewing is on the ankle brace on your sleeve, Mr. Hayes. Your wife must love you a lot to still be keeping such an old item of yours." Tristan gave a low laugh as his fingers brushed across the ankle brace. "She used to understand soccer and me, but not anymore. She doesn't even bother to watch any soccer game, even if there's an offside." Someone started saying, "You need to thank Miss Lenford tonight for bringing you back to your youthful days, Mr. Hayes." Jodie let out a soft cough. "Stop it. I just didn't want Mr. Hayes to feel lonely watching the game alone. It'd be better if Mrs. Hayes was here with you." Tristan was silent for a second before replying nonchalantly, "She doesn't like staying up through the night. It's better for everyone if she stays home." Better for everyone? I stood outside the door with my head lowered, staring at the thermal bag containing the hot soup I had made for him. 8 years ago, during the World Cup finals, Tristan suffered from gastritis, but he insisted on accompanying me until 5 a.m. I had removed the old ankle brace from my college team and sewn it to the sleeve of his jersey. I told him that someone would always be watching over him every time he stayed up late to watch the game. The side of the ankle brace was frayed, and the colors did not match. Tristan teased me about being clumsy with my sewing, but he still wore the jersey to meet all of his friends. However, now, the ankle brace was pressed onto Jodie's shoulder. Someone suddenly opened the door from inside, and Jodie bumped into me with half a bucket of popcorn in her hand. The smile on her face froze. "What are you doing here, Mrs. Hayes?" The screening room turned silent. Tristan was seated in the middle, the remote in his hand, and his legs crossed. When his gaze fell onto the thermal bag by my feet, he frowned slightly. "What are you doing here so late at night?" I bent over to pick up the bag. "The housekeeper told me you hadn't had dinner yet, so I decided to drop by and bring it to you." Jodie quickly took the jersey off, clenching the corner of it. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Hayes. I had no idea the jersey was a gift from you." I sneezed because the air conditioning here was too cold, and Mr. Hayes was concerned for my well-being as his subordinate. "I'll return it to you after washing it." Tristan held her wrist down and said softly, "Put it back on. It's cold in here." I froze in the middle of opening the thermal bag. Tristan's colleagues exchanged glances, and one of them tried to smooth things over. "Mr. Hayes is lucky to have such a considerate wife." All Tristan did was look at me, as if he had not heard what his colleague said. "Leave the soup here. The driver is waiting downstairs to take you home." I glanced at the jersey sleeve, where the ankle brace was pinned with Jodie's brooch through the old threads, leaving a small hole. I reached for the jersey. "I'll take this back to have it washed." Jodie reacted by taking a step back, becoming teary-eyed. "Did I do something wrong again, Mrs. Hayes?" All I did was glance at the jersey several times because I thought it was a meaningful piece of clothing. Tristan stood up to shield her behind him. "It's just an old jersey, Dahlia. Don't make a scene at the office." I looked up at him. "Just an old jersey?" The look in his eyes darkened, but his tone remained composed. "Haven't you always hated it when someone kills the mood at an event? It's the finals tonight and everyone is here." Jodie spoke up in a small voice. "I should return the jersey to Mrs. Hayes. I know I'm not worthy of something as precious as this." Tristan turned to look at her. "No one is saying you're not worthy." That was when excited shouts came from the screening room as the players started appearing on the screen to start the match. I placed the soup on the table, and the glass bowl clinked softly against it. "Enjoy the game, everyone." Tristan seemed taken aback. "Are you leaving just like that?" I zipped my jacket up tightly without looking at him. "What else did you expect? Are you waiting for me to plan who gets benched?" Jodie turned pale. Tristan's fingers tapped on the remote, and his voice lowered slightly. Don't make sarcastic remarks with soccer terms, Dahlia. Wait for me at home. I nodded and turned to leave. I heard Jodie suddenly asking softly behind me, Is Mrs. Hayes mad at me, Mr. Hayes? Tristan was silent for a few seconds before replying, She'll be fine after a night. Before the elevator doors closed in front of me, I saw Tristan return to his seat. The jersey was still hanging around Jodie's shoulders, and the ankle brace on the sleeve was still pinned with her brooch. I was pouring the remaining soup down the sink when my phone rang at 3 a.m. The call from Tristan rang only 3 times before I picked up. It was noisy on his end, and I could hear Jodie yelling, Goal, from his side. Tristan tried to suppress a laugh as he asked me, Were you asleep? I stared at the sink as the soup slowly flowed down. Nope. Tristan sounded happy with that answer. Go to my study and look at the second drawer on the left. There's a blue scorebook in there. Get the driver to deliver it to my office tomorrow morning. I clenched the phone hard. What do you want to do with it? I started that scorebook 8 years ago. It recorded the teams he supported for every World Cup, the amount of alcohol he consumed, and the time of the match when he held my hand. The last page even had the note he secretly passed to me after he was punished and forced to kneel on the ground. Tristan told me back then that the match's champion could change at any time, but the woman next to him would never change. He said with indifference, Jodie is meeting a client tomorrow who wants a World Cup theme for his project. She needs some references, and you don't need that scorebook now anyway. Jodie could be heard speaking near him. The match is about to start, Mr. Hayes. Hurry up. You shouldn't miss this. Tristan gave her an affirmative reply before saying to me, Take a picture for me when you find the scorebook. Make sure not to lose it. He hung up after that. I stood in the study for a long time before finally pulling the drawer open. The blue covers of the book had aged, and the corners were covered with cellophane tape that I had used to hold it together. When I flipped to the last page of the book, I found the note still there, but an unfamiliar silver brooch lay beside it. The brooch looked like the one Jodie had on her night. As I stared at the brooch, I was suddenly reminded of how Tristan had come home very late last week. A small gift bag had fallen out of his suit pocket while he was taking a shower. When I questioned him about it, he took the bag from me and replied nonchalantly that it was a gift from a client. I guess that client was the one who pinned the brooch on my old scorebook. Tristan returned the next morning when the driver stopped by to pick up the scorebook. He was still reeking of alcohol, but he did not look tired at all. I passed the scorebook to him. I took the note. Remember to return the scorebook once you're done with it. Tristan's hands paused while flipping the pages. It's just some old pieces of paper. Why do you care about it? I looked at him. You wrote it for me. Tristan closed the scorebook. Souvenirs shouldn't be turned into shackles, Dahlia. Stop treating every single thing as something so important. Jodie's head poked out from behind him. She was hugging a folder in her hands. Good morning, Mrs. Hayes. I'm here to pick up some documents for Mr. Hayes. I'm sorry to have disturbed both of you. She was not wearing the brooch on her chest, but I could see a thin string tied on her wrist. It was the last of the blue thread I used to sew the ankle brace with. I reached out to stop her. Where did you get that piece of string from? Jodie looked down at it. Mr. Hayes said it's the same color as Argentina's jersey. I thought it looked nice, so I tied it on my wrist. Tristan pulled her behind him. It's just a piece of string. I smiled. Everything seems to be nothing to you. Triton's face fell. Stop embarrassing yourself in front of my subordinate. Jodie quickly shook her head. Mrs. Hayes didn't do it on purpose, Mr. Hayes. I must have crossed the line. I pulled my hand away. Yes, you must have. Jodie got teary-eyed, and Tristan quickly handed the scorebook to her while saying in a slightly cold tone, Wait for me in the car, Jodie. Before Jodie left while hugging the scorebook to her chest, she gently caressed the blue string. Tristan and I were left standing at the door. He looked at me. The company is hosting a World Cup-themed event tonight. You should attend it, or others might think something is wrong with our marriage. I asked him, and who am I supposed to be there as? Tristan acted like he did not understand the question. As Mrs. Hayes, obviously. I glanced at the closed door. But your Mrs. Hayes is someone who can't even get something she wants right away. Even she is forced to wait her turn for it. Tristan clasped a watch over his wrist as his tone remained calm and composed. You were always willing to share what you had with others, Dahlia. When did you become so petty? I lower my eyes. I guess it comes with age. Tristan paused. He was about to say something when his phone rang. Jodie's name appeared on his phone screen, and he quickly picked up and replied in a gentle tone. I'll be down soon. When the door closed once more, I saw a small, fuzzy piece of blue thread on the cupboard at the door. I picked it up to see that it had been forcefully torn off. While I was at the registration counter to sign in for the company event, the staff handed the name tag with my name to Jodie. Jodie was taken aback, but she quickly waved it off with a smile. This name tag belongs to Mrs. Hayes. I can't take it. The girl at the counter lowered her voice. Miss Lenford, Mr. Hayes already informed us that you will be standing by his side on stage tonight. The tag is just a formality. Whose name on it isn't important. I was standing 3 steps away, and I heard everything clearly. Jodie turned back to see me, flustered. I had no idea they made a mistake with the tag, Mrs. Hayes. I'll return it to you right away. Despite her insistence, her fingers clenched the name tag, refusing to let it go. That was when Tristan walked out of the venue in a sharp, black suit, looking like everything was normal. You should stay in your seat at the family's table, Dahlia. Jodie will be taking over the event on stage due to a last-minute decision. I looked at him. A last-minute decision? Tristan avoided eye contact as he helped Jodie straighten the name tag on her chest. Jodie is familiar with the event flow tonight, and the clients love a young face. Don't overthink this, Dahlia. Someone nearby started laughing. It's fitting that Mrs. Hayes stays put where she is. It took me 3 sleepless nights at home to help him write up an entire soccer-themed marketing plan. I put together the copywriting for the poster and the profiles of lesser-known soccer players, but Jodie was going on stage to take the credit. When the host invited Tristan up to the stage for his speech, a large image appeared on the bright screen. It was a picture of my blue scorebook. As they enlarged the image of the scorebook, I could see the words, "The tip of Tristan's ears would turn red after his 3rd drink," appear clearly on the screen. Everyone started laughing, and Jodie picked up the microphone, winking at the crowd. This scorebook is a cherished item of Mr. Hayes. I heard that the person who recorded this was a woman who knew soccer well and was particularly cute. Someone asked, "Is that person Mrs. Hayes?" Jodie looked at Tristan, waiting for him to affirm the statement. He smiled and said, "It used to be." The venue turned silent, and he continued, "Now she's more concerned with my health, but I guess that can be considered another form of her care for me." Laughter rang in the air. I crushed the mineral water bottle in my hand as I sat at the family table. Jodie quickly continued, "Tonight, I'd like to represent that cute lady, and I hope that Mr. Hayes will forgive me if I don't do a good job of telling this story." Tristan looked at her indulgently. "You're doing very well right now." Tina, Tristan's mother, was sitting next to me. She lowered her voice. "Stop looking like that. You shouldn't embarrass your man in public like that." I turned to look at her. "That scorebook is mine, Tina."
She frowned.
"You've been married for 3 years. Do you really need to insist on what belongs to each of you? You should be honored that Tristan is willing to use something of yours in an event like this." I stayed silent after that. The event continued on stage, and at the end of the itinerary, Jodie suddenly took out a transparent box containing the silver brooch and the ankle brace torn off the jersey. She said with a smile, "As Mr. Hayes has shared, this piece of cloth represents the most passionate period of his youth, which is why I will be using it as the lucky draw prize for tonight." I jumped from my seat, and when my chair screeched on the floor, everyone turned to look at me. Tristan frowned right away. "Sit down, Dahlia." However, I approached the stage instead. "Miss Lenford, don't you know that the piece of cloth you're talking about that represents Mr. Hayes' youth is actually the ankle brace from my college team? I sewed it to his jersey myself, and even though it isn't worth much, you don't have the right to give it out as a prize to strangers." Jodie clenched the box as tears started streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Hayes. I thought it was fine, because Mr. Hayes agreed to it. I had no idea it would bother you so much." Tristan took the box and stopped me from grabbing it. "The event is still ongoing. Don't embarrass all of us in front of our clients." I stared at him. "You know what that means to us." He lowered his voice to warn me. "I do, but that isn't reason enough for you to lose your temper." The guests started whispering amongst themselves, and Tina stood up with a smile to say to everyone, "Don't worry about it. It's just a normal couple spat." She came to my side and grabbed my wrist as her fingernails dug into my flesh. "You can hash this out at home." However, I refused to budge. Tristan stared at me coldly. "If you still care about our marriage, you should stop this fiasco right now, Dahlia." I stared at the old ankle brace in the box. The blue thread had been pulled apart messily, and the sewing work was ruined. After the event ended, I went backstage to look for the scorebook, and I found it under a contract on the table filled with gifts. When I pulled out the scorebook, the contract fell to the ground, and I saw a line written at the bottom of the page. "South City Sports Center, World Cup-themed pavilion sponsorship, title transfer agreement. Recipient, Jodie Lenford." I clenched the contract as I spotted the signing date in the top right corner of the papers, which was 2 months ago. I had no idea that they had planned this betrayal so meticulously. When Tristan returned home, I placed the scorebook on the table with the picture of the contract next to it. He unclasped his cufflinks and glanced at the table. Did you go through the company's documents again? I looked up at him. Didn't you promise me the South City Sports Center as a memorial? 3 years ago, I quit my job as a sports columnist to stay by his side and entertain clients on behalf of the Hayes family. He promised me a small World Cup-themed pavilion if the company won the South City project, where I could display our jerseys, ticket stubs, and the old ankle brace. Tristan placed his cufflinks in the tray and replied nonchalantly, "The commercial value of the project is changed. It's better suited to be the venue for Jodie's youth soccer fan club." I questioned him. "Why didn't you tell me about it?" He looked at me. "Would you have agreed if I did?" I smiled. "So, you took it away from me first and just planned to convince me to be okay with it?" Tristan did not deny it. That was when his phone rang, and Jodie's voice could be heard on the other end. "Mr. Hayes, I'm feeling a little nervous about the signing ceremony tomorrow. Will Mrs. Hayes be unhappy about it?" He looked at me and switched to speakerphone. "She'll understand." Jodie was hesitant. "But there's a note missing on the last page of the scorebook. What if the media asks about it?" Tristan frowned. "I'll handle it." After he hung up, Tristan took the scorebook from the table. "Be there tomorrow. It'll look better with Mrs. Hayes present." I pressed down on the other hand of the scorebook. "I'm not going." The look in Tristan's eyes darkened. "Stop being stubborn about this, Dahlia." I looked him right in the eyes. "I'm asking you one last time. Did you plan to let her have that exhibition hall from the very start?" Tristan paused for half a second, but that short moment reminded me of the date on the top right corner of the contract, which was 2 months ago. It was also the time when Jodie started working at the company. I remembered how Tristan hugged me at the kitchen door, telling me about how the South City project could make up for our delayed honeymoon. He pulled the scorebook from under my hand, and the pages in the scorebook cut my palm. "It's a business decision. It shouldn't be decided with emotions." I lowered my eyes to look at the red scratch on my palm. "What about me? Am I a business decision too?" Tristan got annoyed. "You're my wife. Stop comparing yourself with Jodie." That was when I stopped asking any more questions. The next day, I wore a plain dress to the signing ceremony. Tina's expression relaxed when she saw me walking into the lounge. "That's more like it. You shouldn't harbor any anger as husband and wife. When Tristan extends you courtesy, you should just take it." That was when Jodie pushed the door open to enter in a blue and white dress. She carefully passed me a gift box. "Mr. Hayes told me to give you this, Mrs. Hayes. He wants you to open it for him when you get on stage." I opened the box to see a newly made silver brooch inside. It was cushioned with a piece of cloth cut from my old ankle brace, its side pressed down into the shape of a soccer ball. Jodie said, "Mr. Hayes says that an old item like this should transform to accompany him down to the soccer field." My fingers froze at the side of the box. That agreement was just not about giving her the exhibition hall. He had given her the last of the personal items we shared by tearing the brace apart and turning it into an accessory to make her shine on stage. Tristan walked into the lounge, and when he saw me standing still, he reached out to close the box in my hands. "Stop giving us that look. I got someone to preserve it before I had it cut. This way, it would last longer." I looked up at him. "You agreed to have it cut to pieces?" He looked at his watch. "Jodie said that it would look better as an accessory. Why not change it into an accessory I can keep on me rather than letting it collect dust in the drawers? Isn't this what you always wanted, Dahlia?" The signing ceremony began shortly, and when the host announced Jodie's name, the applause was thunderous. Tristan led her up to the middle of the stage where the spotlight shone on the brooch. He picked up the microphone and said with ease, "Miss Jodie Lenford will be the youth ambassador for the themed pavilion at the South City Sports Center, while this brooch represents a very important time in my youth." Jodie became teary-eyed as she looked in my direction. Tristan turned to look at me as well, as if reminding me not to embarrass him. He continued, "Today, I'd like to invite my wife to put this on Jodie to symbolize the handing over of a passion of the past into more suitable hands." A staff member approached me with the brooch, and I took it while my fingers gently caressed the cut on the cloth. As everyone was waiting to see me take in the humiliation and pin the brooch onto my husband's little lover with my own hands, the doors to the venue suddenly burst open. The representative of the initial investor in the South City project strode in with a document in his hand and announced coldly, "Mrs. Hayes, the request you put in yesterday to retract all creative rights of the South City project has been legally approved." Tristan immediately turned to look at me in shock. I smiled as I looked into his astonished eyes, and I let go of the brooch. There was a hard clink as the brooch, which was covered with the flesh and blood of my youth, smashed to the ground. The heavy clink of the silver brooch hitting the polished marble floor echoed through the silent venue. the delicate silver structure bent on impact, and the small, mangled piece of blue cloth, the last remaining scrap of Dahlia's college ankle brace, separated from the metal, sliding across the floor to rest near the toe of Jodie's high-heeled shoe. For a long moment, no one breathed. The reporters' cameras, which had been flashing in anticipation of a heartwarming promotional photo, froze. Tristan's hand remained suspended in the air, his fingers still curved as if holding the microphone. His eyes darted from the ruined brooch on the floor to Dahlia's face, his expression shifting from mild irritation to absolute disbelief. "Dahlia," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh, strained whisper that barely carried beyond the stage. "What do you think you're doing? Pick that up." Jodie's face drained of color. She looked at the representative from Vanguard Capital, Harrison Vance, who stood at the back of the auditorium with a team of lawyers. "Mr. Hayes," she stammered, reaching instinctively for Tristan's arm. What does he mean by retracting the creative rights?" Harrison Vance did not wait for Tristan to recover. He walked down the center aisle, his steps deliberate and heavy. He was a man in his late 50s, a veteran of the sports investment industry who had known Dahlia since her days as a prominent sports columnist. "Mr. Hayes," Harrison said, stopping at the base of the stage. He didn't look at Jodie at all. His eyes were fixed on Tristan, then softened as they turned to Dahlia. "I believe the announcement was quite clear. The South City Sports Center project was approved by our board under one strict condition, that the creative direction, marketing strategy, and cultural archiving remained under the sole intellectual property of Dahlia Hayes. We received a formal legal notice from Mrs. Hayes's legal counsel yesterday afternoon. She has withdrawn her authorization for the Hayes Group to use any of her proprietary concepts, including the pavilion layout, the historical exhibits, and the entire marketing portfolio." "That's impossible." Tina's voice cut through the tension. Tristan's mother stood up from the family table, her face flushed with anger. "She is his wife. Everything she writes, everything she designs, belongs to the Hayes family. Harrison, you've known us for years. You can't let a housewife's emotional tantrum disrupt a multi-million-dollar contract." Harrison Vance turned his head slightly, a cold smile playing on his lips. "With all due respect, Mrs. Hayes Sr., intellectual property law does not recognize marriage as a transfer of creative ownership unless a formal contract is signed. Dahlia Hayes is not an employee of the Hayes Group. She resigned 3 years ago. Every document, every marketing blueprint, and every archival database she created for the South City project was registered under her personal name before it was ever pitched to our board." He looked up at Dahlia. "And as of 9 o'clock this morning, she has revoked your license to use them." Tristan's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, trying to block Dahlia from the cameras that were suddenly beginning to whisper and click again. "Dahlia, we'll talk about this at home. You're embarrassing yourself and the company. Tell Harrison this is a misunderstanding." Dahlia looked at him. For the first time in 8 years, she felt no urge to smooth over the frown on his forehead. She felt no worry about whether his gastritis would flare up from the stress, nor did she care if his company's stock took a hit. "It's not a misunderstanding, Tristan," she said, her voice remarkably calm. "I gave you 3 years of my life as an unpaid helper, letting you use my reputation, my writing, and my ideas to build your corporate image. I tolerated your mother's condescension, and I tolerated your sudden coldness. But I will not let you take the physical remnants of my youth, cut them into pieces, and hand them to another woman to wear as a trophy." She looked down at the bent brooch on the floor. "You said souvenirs shouldn't be turned into shackles," Dahlia continued softly. "You were right. I'm breaking the shackles today." Without waiting for his response, she stepped around him. Jodie tried to shrink back, her eyes watering as she whispered, "Mrs. Hayes, I really didn't know." "Save it, Miss Lenford," Dahlia said, not even slowing her pace. "The pavilion is yours, but you'll have to write your own history for it now. Mine is no longer available for purchase." As Dahlia walked down the stage steps, Harrison Vance stepped aside to let her pass, offering a respectful nod. The reporters surged forward, their microphones thrust toward Tristan, who stood frozen under the bright stage lights, his face pale and his hands clenched into tight fists. The house in the suburbs was quiet when Dahlia returned. It was the house Tristan had bought after their wedding, a place she had spent months decorating, with warm tones, comfortable reading chairs, and framed vintage sports posters. She didn't waste any time. She went straight to the guest bedroom, pulled two large suitcases from the closet, and began packing her clothes. She didn't take the expensive jewelry Tristan had bought her for their anniversaries. Most of it had been chosen by his secretary anyway, lacking any personal touch. She didn't take the designer bags that sat like cold trophies in the master walk-in closet. Instead, she packed her books, her old laptops containing her early columns, her college sports medals, and the few items of clothing she had bought with her own money before she gave up her career. As she was folding a simple knit sweater, her phone buzzed on the bed.
It was a
text message from Tristan. Dahlia, where are you? The reporters are outside the office. We need to issue a joint statement immediately. Stop running away like a child. She stared at the screen for a few seconds. There was no anger left in her, only a profound, exhausting emptiness. She blocked his number, then blocked his mother's number as well. By the time she finished packing, the front door clicked open. Tristan walked into the foyer, his tie loosened and his jacket draped over his
arm.
He looked tired, his eyes bloodshot, but the irritation on his face was
clear.
Dahlia, he called out, his voice echoing through the empty hallway. He saw the suitcases standing near the stairs and stopped. His eyes widened.
Slightly.
What is the meaning of this? Are you threatening me with a divorce?
Now.
Dahlia carried her last bag down the stairs. I'm not threatening you, Tristan. I've already contacted my lawyer. The divorce papers will be delivered to your office tomorrow morning. Tristan let out a short, cynical laugh, shaking his head. A divorce? Over a brooch? Over a small piece of cloth? Dahlia, look at yourself. You're over 30 years old, and you're acting like a jealous teenager. Jodie is just a young girl starting her career. I gave her the pavilion because she has the energy to run the fan club. I didn't think you'd be this petty. It was never about the brooch, Tristan, Dahlia said, setting her bag down.
It
was about the fact that you stopped seeing me as a person a long time ago.
To
you, I was just a domestic fixture. Someone who would always be here, always keep the soup warm, always tolerate your mother, and always let you take whatever you wanted for your business. She walked over to the entryway table and picked up her car keys. You told Jodie that I had learned my lesson and wouldn't make a fuss anymore, Dahlia said, her voice steady. You thought my silence over the last year was compliance. It wasn't. It was just me realizing that there was nothing left here worth fighting for. We've been together for 8 years. Tristan raised his voice, his composure finally cracking. He took a step toward her, his hand reaching out to grab her wrist. I built this life for us. The Hayes Group is at its peak. Do you have any idea how much damage you've caused today? Vanguard Capital is threatening to pull the entire funding for the South City project if we don't resolve the creative rights issue by the end of the week. Dahlia stepped back, avoiding his hand. Then, I suggest you find another creative director. Perhaps Miss Lenford can write your marketing strategy for
you.
After all, she's young and fiery, just like I used to be. She's an assistant. Tristan snapped, his frustration boiling over.
She
doesn't know anything about sports marketing. The investors only signed because of your column's reputation and the archives you built. Then you should have treated the person who built those archives with a little more respect, Dahlia said. She picked up her suitcase handles. Dahlia, if you walk out that door, I won't come after you, Tristan warned, his voice turning cold, reverting to the corporate negotiator he always was. You've been out of the industry for 3 years. The sports journalism world has moved
on.
Without the Hayes family's backing, you're nothing but a retired columnist with a grudge. You won't survive a week on your own. Dahlia paused at the doorway. She looked back at the man she had loved for nearly a decade, the man who had once stayed up until 5 a.m. with gastritis just to watch a match with her. That man was long gone, buried under layers of corporate arrogance and greed. I survived before I met you, Tristan, she said softly. I'll do just fine. She opened the door and walked out into the cool evening air, leaving the keys to the house on the console table. The next morning, the head offices of the Hayes Group were in a state of quiet panic. Tristan sat at his desk, staring at the legal document that had been delivered to his secretary at 8:30 sharp. It was a formal petition for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, along with a comprehensive division of assets. Proposal that was surprisingly clean. Dahlia wasn't asking for his company shares or his family's real estate. She only wanted her personal savings, her intellectual property rights, and the small apartment her parents had left her in the city. A soft knock came at his door, and Jodie entered, carrying a tray with a cup of
Coffee.
Her eyes were red and swollen, and she looked like she hadn't slept at
All.
Mr. Hayes, she said quietly, setting the coffee down. The legal department is waiting for you in the conference room. The public relations team is also outside. They want to know how we should respond to the media inquiries about the South City project. Tristan didn't look up from the divorce papers. Where is the marketing plan we were supposed to submit to Vanguard today? Jodie bit her lip, her fingers trembling. I tried to go through the files Mrs. Hayes left on the share drive, but they're all locked. The legal representative from Vanguard sent over a cease and desist letter. They said if we use even a single sentence from the previous drafts, they will sue us for copyright infringement. Tristan finally looked up, his eyes cold. Then write a new one. You're the youth ambassador for the pavilion, aren't you? You told me you had plenty of ideas for the fan club. Jodie's voice cracked. Mr. Hayes, I only know basic soccer facts from what I looked up online. I don't know how to write a full commercial proposal for a municipal sports center. The investors want a detailed analysis of local fan demographics, historical club narratives, and a 10-year community engagement plan. I don't even know where to start. Tristan leaned back in his chair, a sudden, heavy weight pressing down on his chest. When Dahlia had presented that marketing plan to him a week ago, she had done it over breakfast, pointing out the subtle details she had included to appeal to the city's older soccer veterans while keeping the language modern enough for the youth. She had made it look so simple, so effortless, that Tristan had genuinely believed anyone with a basic understanding of the sport could execute
it.
He remembered her pale face and the dark circles under her eyes from staying up 3 nights straight to perfect it. He had told her she was worrying too much, and that she should focus on her health instead of interfering with company business. Now, looking at Jodie's panicked face, he realized how utterly incompetent his new assistant was when it came to actual work. Get out, Tristan said quietly. Mr. Hayes. I said get out, he raised his voice, sweeping a stack of folders off his
Desk.
Jodie flinched, tears spilling over her cheeks as she scrambled to retrieve her papers and rushed out of the office. The phone on his desk rang. It was his mother. Tristan. Tina's voice was sharp with anxiety. Have you seen the stock market? Our shares are down 4% this morning. The rumors about the Vanguard partnership falling through are spreading. You need to get Dahlia back.
Call
her, apologize by her whatever she wants. We can't let this drag on. She blocked my number, Mother, Tristan said, rubbing his temples. She filed for divorce. Then go to her apartment, Tina demanded. She's just trying to humiliate us. She's a woman. She'll soften up if you give her a proper apology.
Tell her she
can have the pavilion back. Tell her we'll fire Jodie. Just get her to sign the release for the creative rights. Tristan hung up the phone without answering. He looked out the window at the bustling city below. For the first time in his life, he felt a creeping sense of
dread.
Dahlia had always been his safety net, the quiet anchor that kept his life steady while he chased success. He had assumed she would always be there, waiting in the shadows of his achievements. He had realized that once an anchor is cut, the ship simply drifts away. Dahlia's new apartment was small, but it had large windows that let in the morning sunlight. It was located in an older district of the city, close to the sports stadium where she used to cover matches as a young journalist. She sat at her small dining table, sipping tea, while reviewing a contract sent by Harrison Vance. Vanguard Capital wasn't just pulling out of the project with the Hayes Group. They were planning to restructure the entire South City Sports Center initiative. Harrison had offered Dahlia a position as the chief cultural consultant and project director, giving her full control over the themed pavilion. We don't need the Hayes Group's corporate backing to make this work, Dahlia, Harrison had told her over the phone earlier that morning. We need your vision. The city wants a place that feels authentic, not a sterile corporate showroom. If you're willing to lead, we will fund the project directly through your own creative agency. It was an incredible opportunity, one that would officially mark her return to the professional world she had abandoned 3 years ago. Her thoughts were interrupted by a loud, persistent knocking at her door. Dahlia stood up, walked to the entryway, and checked the peephole. Tristan was standing outside, his hair slightly disheveled and his tie completely gone. She opened the door, but didn't invite him in. She stood in the doorway, her expression neutral. What do you want, Tristan? Tristan looked at her, his eyes scanning her simple jeans and t-shirt, her lack of makeup, and the quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from her.
It was a
Stark contrast to the quiet, compliant wife who used to greet him at the door of their villa. "Dahlia," he said, his voice softer than it had been in months. "We need to
Talk.
Can I come in?" "No," Dahlia said simply. "My lawyer is handling the divorce. If you have questions about the assets, you can contact him." Tristan swallowed hard. "I don't care about the assets. Dahlia, I'm sorry. I was wrong about the jersey, and I was wrong about the brooch. I shouldn't have let Jodie wear it, and I shouldn't have had it cut up. I was stressed about the project, and she was always there, agreeing with everything I said.
It
Made me feel like I was young again, like when we first started out." "But she is a me, Tristan," Dahlia said. "And you aren't that young man who cared about soccer anymore. You're a businessman who cares about margins and corporate image. We can go back to how things were," Tristan pleaded, stepping closer.
I'll
"Fire Jodie today. I'll give you the South City Pavilion. You can design it exactly how you want. We can take that honeymoon to Europe we delayed. Just, please, sign the creative rights release. The company is losing millions every day this stays in limbo." Dahlia let out a soft, sad laugh. "Even now, your apology is wrapped in a business transaction. You want me back because your stock price is falling and your investors are leaving. You want the convenient wife who fixes your problems." "That's not true," Tristan insisted, his voice rising slightly. "I care about you, Dahlia. We've been together for 8 years. You can't just throw that away over a temporary lapse in judgment." "It wasn't a temporary lapse, Tristan. It was a slow, steady erosion of respect," Dahlia said. "When you told Jodie that I had learned my lesson, you showed me exactly how you viewed me. You didn't view me as a partner. You viewed me as a domestic animal you had successfully trained to stay quiet." She began to close the door. "Dahlia, wait." Tristan reached out to block the door, his face turning pale. "If you do this, you're destroying the Hayes Group. My mother, our family's reputation." "Your family's reputation is not my responsibility anymore," Dahlia said. "Goodbye, Tristan." She pushed the door shut and locked it. She heard him call her name a few more times, his fists thudding against the wood, before the hallway finally fell silent. A week later, the Hayes Group held an emergency board meeting. The atmosphere in the room was suffocating. Several major shareholders sat around the long mahogany table, their faces grim. Tina sat near the head of the table, her hands trembling as she clutched a cup of chamomile tea. Tristan sat at the center, looking exhausted. The dark circles under his eyes were prominent and he had lost weight. "The numbers are in," one of the board members said, throwing a report onto the table. "Vanguard Capital has officially terminated their contract with us. They've cited a breach of creative viability, and because we couldn't deliver the proprietary marketing plan by the deadline, they are invoking the penalty
clause.
We owe them $5 million in damages." "Not only that," another shareholder added, looking coldly at Tristan. "Several of our other sports-related clients are questioning our capability. They've found out that the core of our successful campaigns over the last 3 years wasn't developed by our marketing team, but by your wife. And now that she's gone, they're looking to move their accounts." Tina slammed her cup onto the table. "This is absurd. She was just a columnist. We can hire dozens of columnists from the top universities to replace her." "We tried that," Mrs. Hayes, the head of human resources, said quietly. "We hired 3 senior copywriters last week. None of them could replicate the depth of Dahlia's database or her personal relationships with the local sports clubs. The clubs don't want to talk to us anymore. They're all signing deals with Vanguard's new sports division." "Vanguard's new division?" Tristan looked up, his voice hoarse. "What are you talking about?" The HR head hesitated before opening a tablet and sliding it across the table. "They made the announcement this morning." On the screen was a press release from Vanguard Capital. The headline read, "Vanguard Capital announces partnership with Apex Sports and Culture Agency, led by renowned director Dahlia Hayes." There was a photo accompanying the article. Dahlia stood in the center of the South City Sports Center's newly renovated pavilion, wearing a sharp, tailored navy suit. She looked elegant, confident, and incredibly professional. Standing next to her was Harrison Vance and several legendary retired soccer players from the local clubs, all of them smiling warmly. The article detailed how Dahlia's agency had secured the exclusive creative rights to the South City project and would be developing a network of sports heritage pavilions across the country. Tristan stared at the photo. The woman on the screen looked so familiar, yet so completely foreign. She was no longer the quiet shadow waiting for him in their silent home. She was the brilliant, fiery woman he had fallen in love with in college, the one he had slowly, systematically tried to extinguish, so she would fit neatly into his corporate life. This is her doing, Tina hissed, her eyes wide with rage.
She planned this.
She stole our project to build her own career. She didn't steal anything, Mother, Tristan said, his voice barely a whisper. It was always hers. I just convinced myself that because she loved me, I had the right to take it. The door to the conference room opened, and Jodie stood there, looking nervous. Mr. Hayes, the legal team from Vanguard, is downstairs. They've served us with a formal lawsuit for the unauthorized use of Mrs. Hayes's archival materials in our initial pitches. Tristan looked at Jodie. Her blue and white dress, which had once seemed so bright and energetic, now looked cheap and childish in the sterile boardroom. The thin blue thread she had tied around her wrist was gone, replaced by a cheap silver bracelet. She had tried so hard to replace Dahlia, but she had only succeeded in helping him destroy everything that actually mattered. Leave, Tristan said to her, his voice devoid of any emotion. Jodie blinked, her eyes filling with tears. Mr. Hayes. You're fired, Jodie, Tristan said, not even looking at her. Get your things and leave the building. Jodie let out a soft sob, covering her mouth as she turned and ran down the hallway. None of the board members even glanced at her. To them, she was just an insignificant catalyst in the downfall of a once great partnership. 2 months later, the divorce was finalized. The signing took place in a quiet conference room at Dahlia's lawyer's office. Dahlia arrived early, wearing a simple cream-colored trench coat. She looked rested, her skin glowing and her eyes bright with the energy of her new venture. Tristan arrived a few minutes later, accompanied by his corporate lawyer. He looked like a shadow of his former self. His company had survived the Vanguard lawsuit by paying a hefty settlement, but their reputation in the sports industry was severely damaged, and they had been forced to downsize their offices. He sat across from her, his eyes fixed on her face. You look well, Dahlia. I am, Dahlia said, offering a polite, professional smile. Thank you. The lawyers went through the final documents, pointing out the signature lines. The division of assets was exactly as Dahlia had requested.
She didn't take a
single penny of the Hayes family fortune, only what she had earned herself. When it was time to sign, Tristan hesitated. His pen hovered over the paper, his fingers trembling slightly. Dahlia, he said, his voice quiet. Do you remember the World Cup finals 8 years ago? When I had gastritis and you stayed up with me until 5 in the morning? Dahlia's hand paused on her own pen. I remember. I really did love you back then, Tristan said, a genuine tear slipping down his cheek. I don't know when I became the person I am today. I'm sorry I ruined the jersey. I'm sorry I ruined everything. Dahlia looked at him, and for the first time in months, she felt a soft, gentle warmth in her heart, not of love, but of closure. The anger and the hurt had fully evaporated, leaving behind only the peaceful memory of a youth that was now safely in the past. I know you loved me then, Tristan, she said softly. And I loved you too.
But
we grew into different people and we wanted different things. You wanted a trophy wife who would sacrifice her identity for your success, and I wanted a partner who would respect my work. She signed her name firmly on the final page. The match is over, Tristan, she said, closing her folder. And it's time for both of us to leave the stadium. Tristan stared at her signature for a long moment before slowly putting his pen to the paper and signing his own name. When they stood up to leave, Tristan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a small, carefully preserved piece of blue cloth. It was the ankle brace, cleaned and stitched back together as best as possible, though the old needle scars were still visible. I managed to get this back from the designers, he said, holding it out to her. I know it's ruined, but I think it belongs with you. Dahlia looked at the small piece of cloth. It was the physical symbol of her youth, of her college sports days, and of the love she had once given so freely. She took the box, her fingers brushing against his one last time. Thank you, Tristan. I'll keep it as a reminder of who I used to be. She walked out of the conference room, her steps light and her head held high. Outside, the autumn air was crisp and fresh. Her phone buzzed with a message from Harrison Vance, letting her know that the grand opening of the South City Sports Center's themed pavilion was scheduled for the upcoming weekend, and the local community ticket sales had already sold out. She smiled, placing the small velvet box in her bag, and walked toward the subway. The stadium lights of her new life were turning on, and this time, she wasn't sitting on the bench. She was leading the team.